Hello and welcome to the Franz van Kat interview. I'm Annette Young. He's the man who coined the phrase, a diplomatic tsunami. This to describe what Israel will confront this coming September when Palestinians are expected to seek unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly. Former Israeli Prime Minister and Defence Minister Ehud Barak has warned the time has come for tough actions, not words, to prevent his country from ending up on a slippery slope towards isolation. This is all compounded by the fact that Israel's relation with Washington, its major ally in this diplomatic battle, are at their lowest ebb. Ehud Barak joins me in the studio today. Mr. Barak, thank you.
From your mouth it sounds much more convincing than from mine.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. As I just said, the Palestinians are steaming ahead with their plans to head to New York in September, where they're going to seek UN recognition for a state, but it does face a major obstacle, doesn't it? Namely the fact that the Security Council has to also give its go-ahead, and the US, of course, has the power of veto. Are you confident that the US will follow through on its promise that it will use its veto?
I think they will, and I hope that they will be able to convince beforehand both the quartet, French, the Europeans, and Russia to do the same. Probably in Russia we won't succeed. I think that that's better for both Israeli, the world, and the Palestinians in a way.
But they explicitly have not said as such, have they, to this point, Washington? They've been very...
I believe they made it quite clear among themselves that they're going to veto it. They signaled it to the Palestinians in order to help them decide to leave this effort for a while and start with or try the opportunity to go into normal negotiation. I strongly believe that even for the Palestinians as a nation, there are many prominent Palestinians who think the same, it's better to go into the negotiating room being ready to take decisions and join an international effort led by the Americans, the Europeans, or whatever, to try to move forward through negotiation.
Do you think Washington is losing patience with your government?
I hope not. I don't think that we have to stop all construction. Basically we are talking about those areas where there will be a need for modification under whatever version. We're not going to go back to the 67 borders. We need the settlement blocks. We need a border, the Jewish communities, neighborhoods in Jerusalem that you well know. I think that altogether it's a marginal fraction of the area of the West Bank, but the change is dramatically the acceptance of both demographic realities as well as security needs of Israel. But having said that, we are ready to go very far. We are ready to go into the negotiating room under a goal or a shared vision to end up with two states for two nations. The other elements which are basically well known and end of conflict and finality of all claims in order to make sure that once and for all we leave this conflict, at least contractually, behind us.
But it's at an impasse at the moment. I mean, there's a stalemate. And so what are the odds of peace talks resuming before September?
I hope that it's at least 50-50, probably more than 50-50, and I pray that it will end up being materialized. And once it's materialized, it doesn't matter what were the prospects before. It depends upon both sides. If it were to be dependent only upon us or upon you, I would say that it's almost 100%. It will be open. It's had to do with the Palestinians. They have to come ready to really negotiate, not just to use it as a veil, as a kind of pro forma statement that helps them to reduce pressure not to go to the UN General Assembly. If they will come genuinely ready to negotiate, we will be there. I don't believe neither borders nor security, if it's taken seriously by both sides, should be kind of unsurmountable for negotiators.
But the reality is at the moment, as far as the Palestinians are concerned, they're not coming back to the negotiating table while Israel continues to build in the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
I think that you not you personally, but the European governments, the quartet, should be able to tell the Palestinians honestly, we supported you, we helped you all along the way. back your position. Now you have to come to grips with realities. There is no real way to announce a end of any construction. There are 500,000 people living there. They need about a new kindergarten every week. They need for normal growth, natural growth, they need many items. It's about taking the responsibility, reaching agreement. If we have a breakthrough and have an agreement, it will anyhow delineate a border. If certain building which is built right now, even during negotiation, will end up being on the Palestinian side of a mutually agreed border, why should they care? They will get it. If it ended up to be on the Israeli side of mutually agreed border, why should they care? It's in our side anyhow. So I don't think that that's the real issue. Once you come to concrete negotiation, you are ready to end it within a year.
Now, while you're in Paris, you're going to be meeting with French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé. You'll be inevitably talking about this French proposal for a peace conference in July with the hope of kickstarting peace talks. What do you think the odds of that happening?
You know, in fact, I talked about it with Juppé. He visited Israel. We highly appreciate him. He's extremely...
Do you support, would you attend such a conference?
He's extremely seasoned and thoughtful, and a person who fully understands nuances of international politics and diplomacy. We will consider any proposal. We are considering. We expect, as I mentioned, to, first of all, this type of definition of negotiation to be there with the vision on two states for two peoples and end of conflict, finality of claims. And we have another expectation from the quartet, including from Juppé, to come blankly to the Palestinians and tell them, you know, now that you have this reconciliation with Hamas, who explicitly say we are going to destroy Israel and eliminate it from history and map, we expect you, Hamas, to say explicitly, publicly, that you accept the quartet terms that were set by Europe and Ban Ki-moon and the Americans and the Russians, namely recognition of Israel, accepting all previous agreements that were signed by PLO vis-à-vis Israel, and denouncing terror in action, not just in words, as you have said.
French President Nicolas Sarkozy and Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron have indicated, however, that if peace talks don't get up and running by September and there's nothing happening on their front, that they'll have no other option but to seriously consider this notion of unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state.
That's one of the reasons I came here. I want to be able to exchange views directly with the people bearing the responsibility, as well as with the public here, and to be able to tell them in advance, we are ready, we fully understand it takes painful decisions. I don't believe personally that this is a zero-sum game. I believe that it serves both Palestinians and Israelis and the rest of the world to find a way to convince the Palestinians to come in good faith, bona fide, into the negotiating room and start negotiating all the issues. Probably starting with border and security, but in a way that both refugees and the end of conflict should be intertwined into the very early stages. We cannot conclude negotiating borders and security without understanding that both refugees and end of conflict are going to be solved.
Do you have confidence, however, that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be able to navigate his way through this situation?
I believe that the recent, what I call the historic earthquake in the Arab Strip from Tunisia to Bahrain, complicates in a way the making of a peace. So I feel that it's not easier, it's more complicated for Abu Mazen. He used to have Mubarak, he used to have the Arab League. Nothing is the same anymore. And he now has to take into account the sentiment in the street, which is more hostile to America and to Israel than the moderate autocrats that had been. And it's the same. It's not easier for Netanyahu. I'm the one who keep pressing
because
in this government.
Because you are the lone voice, aren't you, in the government? government. And as a result, because you are the lone voice, does that mean that it's going to happen? Because the majority of people in the government do not share your views.
I will put all my weight, and I'm putting it, to try to convince our people to move, to take the risk and move. But you have to understand, and I am honest enough to understand, that the last events in the Middle East made it more urgent in my judgment, but more complicated in judgment of all, because people realize that we are here alone. We are only outpost of Western civilization in this turbulent area, and that at the moment of truth we might find ourselves alone, have to protect ourselves, defend ourselves. So it's not easy when I approach people, not necessarily the Prime Minister, I approach people in Israel, tell them, now the time to move toward peace. They tell me, Ehud, are you crazy? It sounds that everything is burning around us. It's time to be more cautious.
So is there a danger that Israel is becoming diplomatically isolated, that it is to this decade what South Africa was in the 1980s and what Serbia was in the 1990s?
What really disturbs me is not the potential resolution in the UN General Assembly per se. What really disturbs me is that I can see easily behind it in the background a movement to delegitimize Israel, and I see it, the attempt to corner Israel into a place where it will be isolated, and I feel that it's unfair and unjust, because we are basically want to go there. We are ready. I cannot ignore that Netanyahu has its own political. You have been to Israel. You know our politics. It's quite complicated, even if you want to make the decision. Before you are there to open the door, you have to cross the corridor, along the corridor with these penetrating media and transparent processes. You have to announce many concessions that you are considering. You are losing your power base long before you have an agreement or even know whether you will ever have it. So I believe a way should be found to go underneath the surface or behind closed room, to go ahead of what we expose to the public in order to make both parties, the leadership level, confident that they are moving on a solid ground and not just attempting jumping into empty swimming pools.
Ehud Barak, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining us, and that's it for this edition of the Frans van Kat interview. Stay tuned for news and headlines which are coming up shortly.